All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a highly contrarian and honestly fascinating philosophy drawn directly from the source. That is, the teachings and writings of Lifeshan Yun guide Xu Feng. We're going to take a really close look at his perspective on modern self-help culture. You know, specifically those little platitudes and feel-good quotes we see scrolling down our social media feeds every single day. If you've ever felt like the modern self-help industry is kind of missing the mark, well, this perspective is going to be incredibly thought-provoking for you. So, according to Shefeng's teachings, the comforting quotes we're surrounded by aren't actually helping us at all. In fact, they're actively numbing us to reality. He absolutely doesn't view these inspirational sayings as genuine medicine for our struggles. Instead, he bluntly defines chicken soup for the soul as an anesthetic. It's a super powerful metaphor, and it really sets the stage for his entire critique of modern spiritual advice. And this comparison brilliantly illustrates his core thesis. Shufeng makes a very clear distinction here. Think about physical anesthesia for a second. It's absolutely crucial and totally beneficial when a patient needs to survive the unbearable pain of surgery, right? It gets you through a temporary acute crisis. But spiritual anesthesia? When people are suffering from worry or pain, anxiety, fear, these comforting quotes just numb their spirits. While it might help someone survive a temporary difficulty, Shufeng argues that if you over-apply this numbness, if you're just constantly consuming this chicken soup, it literally turns you into a soulless walking corpse who completely ignores real-world problems. So, let's get into the specifics. Here is his first example: delusions of grandeur. This is the first of 4 specific traps he identifies. Now, we have all heard this piece of chicken soup, right? You are your own god. It's heavily aimed at boosting self-confidence. It's designed for someone who feels small or powerless, offering them this ultimate promotion, basically telling them they are the absolute center of their own universe. And hey, on the surface, it sounds incredibly empowering. But here is where Xu Feng argues this creates a really dangerous divide between illusion and reality. You instantly feel great, right? Like you're the master of your destiny. But the actual result? People who regularly consume this just become blindly optimistic, they become arrogant, ignorant, and even shameless. Because they've completely lost touch with their actual real-world limitations, he suggests that over time, they become indistinguishable from mental patients, just living entirely in a fabricated reality. Moving right along to example number 2, the trap of toxic self-love. This one targets the modern obsession with self-love, which is arguably one of the biggest themes in today's digital wellness spaces. You should love yourself. As long as you can do that, then the world will be filled with love. It sounds beautiful, especially when someone is feeling unloved or isolated. It offers this seemingly simple formula: just fix the inside and the outside will magically conform. It tells you that the secret to universally experiencing love is just to focus all that affection entirely onto yourself. But the crucial point Shefeng makes here is that this advice just causes people to completely ignore reality. The illusion is that the plot of the whole world will just turn over and become captive to your love. But the harsh reality? He points out that this really just makes people more selfish. They completely ignore the actual cruelty of the world around them. He uses this great, blunt example. If a person is a slacker, loving themselves just gives them a convenient excuse to become even lazier. He notes that the more a dog loves itself, well, the more it just becomes a dog. It doesn't elevate you, it just traps you in your existing flaws. That brings us to example number 3, forced acceptance. Here, Xu Feng tackles the popular advice handed out when someone is thoroughly disgusted by their toxic environment. When the world around you feels chaotic or just plain wrong, this specific brand of spiritual chicken soup gets prescribed. You must accept everything. While accepting everything is meant to make a person feel vast and unbothered, like they're the enlightened ruler of 100 valleys, the reality of applying this without any boundaries is much, much harsher. It basically asks you to just turn off your critical thinking. The Lifeshan Yuan Guide argues that by indiscriminately accepting everything around you, you aren't actually becoming enlightened. You are effectively reducing your soul to a dumping site for trash. Because think about it. What is the only thing in the world that accepts absolutely everything, including the absolute worst waste? A garbage dump. By anesthetizing your natural sense of disgust, you're just allowing toxicity to pile up inside you. And finally, we have example number 4, the apathy of inward seeking. Whenever people are facing their environment pessimistically and feeling totally lost, the spiritual wellness industry always points right here. Look inward, because what you have there decides everything. It creates this fleeting, comforting feeling that you don't actually need to struggle in the messy outside world. It suggests that fixing your problems, getting what you need, or even becoming a god is just a piece of cake, because everything you could ever possibly need is already tucked away neatly inside your own mind. But let's look at the brutal reality of this teaching. Shufeng points out the sheer absurdity of it. You can look inward all you want, but you aren't going to find villas, supercars, beautiful delicacies, or a literal heaven in there. Looking inward doesn't magically produce physical food or wealth to pay your bills. Eventually, a person who only looks inward just stops interacting with the outside world altogether. They become expressionless, emotionally numb, completely detached from reality, and physically haggard. The anesthetic has entirely taken over. To really hammer this whole philosophy home, he uses this darkly comedic story called the allegory of the starving beggar. Picture this. There's a malnourished beggar sitting on a sidewalk who desperately needs calories. Notice how each passing wise person offers increasingly disconnected advice. A nutritionist walks by and says to eat premium bird's nest porridge. A kind soul says, hey, fly to America for a personal trainer. A spiritual master comes along and says to look inward for delicacies. And finally, the enlightened master says, you are your own god, love yourself, and you'll be famous. Not a single one of them just hands the guy a piece of bread. According to the text, these totally out-of-touch advisors perfectly represent the people offering spiritual chicken soup today. They're offering these high-minded anesthetic platitudes to people who are facing real, tangible, and practical struggles in their everyday lives. The advice sounds profound? Sure, but it's utterly useless and frankly a bit insulting to the actual reality of the situation. And this brings us to the macro warning, a nation in decline. Shufeng warns that this widespread spiritual anesthesia flooding our social media turns temporary emotional relief into a totally incurable societal disease. If everyone is constantly fed this chicken soup, they become way too numb to face reality, and absolutely no actual problems ever get solved. So as we wrap up this explainer, we want to leave you with a rather provocative reflection based on Life Shanuan Guide Shufeng's teachings. Look at the quotes you save, the ones you share, and the ones you use to find comfort. Are they actually helping you face your challenges head-on, or are they just an anesthetic, numbing your soul and turning you away from the real world? It's a challenging question for sure, but one that is well worth asking. Thanks so much for diving into this with us today.